Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live on top of Bed of Roses in the honeymoon suite. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. It's another week, another episode, a lot more to talk about. We've got car reveals from the different teams. We've got some Formula One team previews. We've got some League of Legends. IEM Katowice finished, so we've got some notes on that. Justin, good to see you. It's feels like it's been a while, but I think it's just been a long week so far for me.
I was going to say, I have a feeling it's been the same amount of time since the last time I saw your face, no longer than usual. But a long week will do that. I imagine we're, at least we're on the falling action of the hump day, right? At least
Yes.
We're moving into the tail end. We can look forward to that. But yeah, good to see you too, my friend. Now, have you ever been on vacation with a buddy and you walk into your hotel room and God damn it, they gave us the honeymoon suite again?
I have not, but I love to joke about it. And when I worked in the hotels and everything, I would have like guys come in and like they're on. You could tell that they've got their golf clubs and they're like on a dude's weekend or something like that. And they're like, oh yeah, like we're here for our room, and like they're like, oh, like 2 double beds and everything. And I'm like, oh, I thought you guys had the heart-shaped bed in the honeymoon. Like I would
Got 'em.
I would joke with them, and it always got a laugh. I had my my fair share of little cheesy dad jokes that for me, like I heard them a million times because I would tell them all the time, but to these people it was like the first time they heard them, so
Sure, it was
they
a
were
novel
always,
idea.
yeah, so it was always entertaining for them, even though it was like kind of just muscle memory for me. Like anyone coming into the hotel and they're like, oh, Aaron, that's my nephew's name, I'd be like, I got it for my birthday, it's a good one. It's a really bad joke, but I would get a laugh every single time.
Sure.
If they
the first time they heard it.
if they picked up on it. Sometimes that one would right over their head. And speaking of right over our head, what's the deal with all these freaking UFOs, man? Like, I don't know if you've been following along, but just out of curiosity, there have been I don't know, a lot more UFO and floating object sightings, US military shooting things out of the sky a bit more lately. It's been weird, and not to get too far on a tangent, but I just find it very interesting because the prospect of aliens is always like they could be out there, they might not be, but now we're seeing all this stuff in the news and I'm like, it's intriguing.
I take all that stuff with a grain of salt, although hopefully the people that make first contact, if first contact hasn't been made yet, are good ambassadors for the species. Like you don't want me making first introductions, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'd say I'm not at the top of the list either, so
Sure. So yeah, if there are aliens, just don't come knocking on my door. I will not be a good example of the human race. I think I use too many curse words,
I would probably be like, no soliciting, get out of here.
There you go. Yeah, we think they were trying to sell us something.
Yeah, so but no, I thought that was an interesting thing from the past week, but I guess I'll get into my week for this past week, but
let's have it.
My rose for this past week is that and it's actually more from today, but Senna's dog sitter is back, or at least today was able to, she had car issues.
We're back, baby.
She had some car issues. She hadn't been able to come watch Senna, so it kind of threw a little wrench into our plans and all for how we were maneuvering the work schedules and everything. And so she was back today. and like she loves Senna. She like sends us pictures. She's always like, she is so great. I love like hanging out with her for an hour and everything. And we're like it's great for us too. It makes our lives a little easier. So so that's a definite positive that's just like eased a little bit of figuring out and all in the normal day to day. My thorn for this week, I've got two actually, but I have had like headaches for like 3 days straight now, and they're just killing me. I take Tylenol, they go away, Tylenol wears off, they come back, and it's been like this cycle for the past 3 days or so, which just it tires my brain out. So not too fun. I'm not sure exactly what's causing them. I've been trying to drink more water. I've been trying to like I really haven't done anything different in terms of what I'm eating or how much I'm eating. So I'm trying to do the things that I think would ease that, and not much is helping. So that's a bit of a bummer. And just kind of like, it's just always, no pun intended, in the back of my head, just kind of like lingering, like, I could start back up anytime. But the other thorn was I had to go to the auto shop this past weekend and get my inspection done, get like oil change, and there were a host of other things that needed to be done. My car hadn't had like a big service in a while, so I'm gonna have to get new tires pretty soon. They had to change a bunch of filters and this and that, and so just a lot, an expensive trip to the auto shop, which is never what you're looking for. However, it did prompt me, and kind of a half seed, since it's not my seed, but it prompted me to look into like what they were billing me for on my thing. And I know that they're not like ripping me off. I go to an auto shop where my friend's dad works. He's the mechanic who like takes care of my car and all. But I was looking at it, and like a couple things like changing the cabin filter, changing the engine filter are wildly easy to do, and cost, the two of those things combined cost almost $100. I can buy the filters for like $10 each, and it would take me 5 minutes to change both of them with like very minimal risk of me like fucking anything up. So it like prompted me to like look into that and be like, oh, like I can actually do it. Like I've done some small things on my car. I've changed headlights. I've like done little things here and there. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can actually probably do this in the future and save myself a little bit of money. So that was kind of a positive that came out of that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, because I think a lot of times what happens is like it's the billing for the time that they do, and depending on like how they want to break that down, if they say like, you know, if something only takes 15 minutes, we bill for 15 minutes, or like, well, you bill for the whole hour. So yeah.
Well, and even like just because it's broken down into like the manpower, the labor, and the cost of the thing, and even like the cost of the filters was twice what I could just buy them for on Amazon. Because they're probably using like name brand, like this and that or whatever, when with that stuff it doesn't really matter that much. So so yeah, I'm like trying to learn a little more car stuff to save myself some money, which is like cool for down the road, because I'm not completely incapable of doing that stuff. It's just I've never been taught. So found some good YouTube videos and all. But my actual seed is that these warm days that we're having, I know they may not be here to stay, but they've got me excited about like the nicer weather coming down the line here in the spring. The sun is staying out longer. I'm not like in the dark for my entire drive home anymore like I have been. And so it's just got me itching for the nice weather, but I'm trying to hold back my excitement until we make it out of the woods. With there could very easily just be a week, like 2 weeks from now, that is brutally cold. So I'm not breaking out the swimsuit yet, and not throwing on the Speedo and going tanning on the roof or anything. But but yeah, that is my rose, thorn, and seed for this week.
Damn, dude. My rose would be seeing you in a Speedo tanning on a roof.
I don't know if my neighbors here in the building would agree with you, but
That's funny.
but nonetheless, I appreciate that very much.
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. Dude, my rose is maybe a little similar to similar to this, but my rose here, I've had a bunch of like just appointments, things to do, things to go pick up and grab. Um and it's kind of nice to have just a little bit of, I don't want to say freedom, but just like getting out into the world a little bit, being the one to go pick this up or do this, where previously, because I was on, a lot of dog sitting duty, Sarah would do the running around because she was, going to see family or whatever, and I was, watching the dogs. But now that I have a little bit of time during the day, it's just kind of nice to like get out during the day and just do a little driving, do a little, exploring in the sunshine.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a fun seed where I haven't had the like onus to, I haven't really had to. So it's fun to just kind of like basically just like make up reasons to go frolic in society.
Yeah, you get to meander around, do some people watching,
Exactly.
see. I'm sure some interesting characters here and there, and kind of entertain yourself, add a little excitement to the day.
Yeah. Oh, and there are characters aplenty around here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my rose here, and then my thorn is a little bit of taking your car in. It's that time of year for inspections. I gotta re-up this. I gotta refile that. I gotta call this guy to get a document. I gotta get my photo taken. So yeah, it's that time of year where you gotta sign everything, gotta dot the T's and cross the I's all over again. So it is, kind of that time of year, and always, like you said, comes with some headaches. My seed here for the week is with a bunch of these meals that I've been talking about. I always big up Sarah a good amount. I say she spoils me, this and that, but where I have gotten a lot better is knowing how to, or figuring out how to put myself into a helping position in the kitchen, where previously I would come out and like, I don't want to just like ignore her in the kitchen and then just like get to sit down to a hot meal. I would often want to help in some way. She wouldn't always know like the task to give me. She wouldn't always know like how I can help, what the process was. So slowly we figured out a little bit of a dance that we do in the kitchen, where obviously she's got the main role, but I figured out ways to be a very like useful supporting cast member. And part of that is like how like because we have an extra laptop now, we can pull that up in the kitchen and like not really mind if it gets a little bit of flour on it or whatever. So we can pull up the recipe like on a bigger screen, where she doesn't have to like have it on her phone, on whatever like recipe website. So I can see it, I can look at what step she's on, I can see what we've got, and then I can just kind of work around her and just like help like set her up to do like her next thing basically.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's kind of been fun, like learning, like being her sous chef in the kitchen and kind of figuring out how I can help and prepare the meals. Like when we did the Mongolian beef, I, unpackage, clean, slice it up, prepare, get it all on the plate, do the seasoning, get it cornstarch, get it ready for her, just like set it aside. So like that's a whole thing that she doesn't have to do. I've improved my knife skills with like veggie slicing, where I used to be like really slow and actually like kind of scared of the knife in some way. Now I've got my knuckle cutting down, where
Yeah.
like even if I am moving a little quick, I'll just nick a knuckle, nothing bad will happen. So yeah, I'm like kind of really getting in a mode, and it's been a lot of fun.
Nice. I love
Yeah,
that. Like Colleen, before we had Senna, would sous chef quite a bit and help me out with things, and that was always my struggle. I I don't know how to. I'm not the best delegator, and that's at work. That's in like cooking and all, because I'm like in my brain, I know my process and everything, but like vocalizing it is not always the easiest like thing for me. Um,
yeah,
and like at work, like similarly, I'm just like, oh, like I know how to do this, so it's easier for me to just do it instead of trying to explain what needs to be done and yada yada. When if I could do that better, then it will be a short learning curve, and then it's just like good from there. So like you're picking up like better knife skills, you're figuring out like where you fit in and everything. And so Colleen would do that a bit as well, and help me out where she could. But now her biggest help when I'm cooking is just keeping the dog preoccupied, because
sure.
the puppy needs it. So but
Yeah,
that's also
I imagine that the doorbell ringing can get intense if you guys ignore for more than 30 seconds.
when I've had her home alone and I'm like cooking by myself. I swear to you, the one time Colleen had a work thing after work, and I'm like there with the dog, and Senna was just, I would get through like one step of my cooking. Like I sliced up the steak for the teriyaki or whatever, and then had to take her out. Then I seasoned all the meat and veggies and all, and I had to take her out because she rang the bell. And like this was when she was a little younger, so I didn't know. I couldn't tell if the bell meant I need to go now or like I just need attention. But it was
Right.
just like it slowed the process down. It took me like probably 30 to 45 minutes longer to cook my dinner, just because of
Damn.
the amount of like stop, take her out, make sure she's good, come back, start again, stop. Like it was, so that's nice, and I'm sure Sarah appreciates it a lot.
Yeah, and it's just like fun to, just hang out and connect. So yeah, that's been nice. But that's my rose thorn seed. I just want to comment one thing on your thorn. There's a possibility, and this is my professional opinion, there's a possibility that your headaches are just from just some general tension in your head, neck, and shoulders.
Well,
Maybe schedule a 30-minute massage, have them just like work your skull and your neck, and I'll bet you'll be feeling great.
I had a feeling, because if you remember, like the past couple weeks, I had talked about my having some back pain, or I think last week maybe, just but having some back tightness and all, and that's still there. Like it's become much more isolated, and so now the tension and like pain is isolated to a specific spot that I've had like long standing pain. Like I had cortisone shots in my back when I was in high school. Like it went from being this like neck, head, like middle of the back and all, to kind of near my right shoulder blade, like deep in
Mm.
there. And I just like beat the hell out of it with the shiatsu massager thing that Colleen has. I've done that a couple times, and it like just has not quite done it. So that may be something that I have to look to do coming up soon, because
Hmm.
it had crossed my mind that that might be a side effect of the back pain and all that I've had. So
Definitely could be a contributing factor. But yeah,
So hopefully I get that figured out, and yeah, I might just have to pop in for 30 minutes somewhere here pretty soon. But moving right along into some kind of general news and then F1. Just a cool thing that I'm happy about, but Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the new game that came out recently, the multiplayer mode, they're implementing a ranked system now that you can like go up and down divisions and kind of progress. They have certain like unlockable camos and operators and things like that, based on what rank you are and everything. And so, not that I don't plan to play it that much, because I mostly use the multiplayer game just to level up guns, unlock camos, things like that. But I think it's cool because it is something that people have talked about for a while, and now it's like a nice step in the right direction, I think, in terms of like saying, hey, you can play like pubs and just go out, and if you get absolutely shit on by someone who just happens to be in your lobby that's better than you, then like that's the way it is. But like also, if you want to go and try and like play against similar skill levels, grind, like improve your skills and all, there's a place to do that too. So I think it's a nice little addition. Whether I'm going to use it or not, I thought it was a cool thing to see them coming out with there.
That's interesting. If you would have asked me, just like, man on the street, does Call of Duty have a ranked lobbies? I would have said hell yeah. That's interesting that they don't.
So they have like CDL, with Call of Duty League, like ladders that you can like, I think, go into and try and progress as a team to like potentially make it high, like into tournaments or whatever. But
no solo.
No like solo, like ranked mode or anything where you can just kind of grind and like try to improve and see like just where your skill level's at and all. And I don't know what the breakdown of the different divisions are, but there's going to be like it's going to have like a top 25 on the ladder and stuff like that. And I mean, to be honest, like that was one of when I early on in the time playing League and everything, when I was really grinding rank, trying to improve, it was really cool being able to go in the client, see the ranked ladder and the top players and like know a bunch of them, or like have seen them stream, have seen them on teams. The one thing that I think was one of the best things that League had in their client previously that they did away with was just being able to pop in to view like high elo games. Like that thing where you could just go and spectate like random high elo games was super cool, because it was on a delay. So it was like a 30 second to a minute long delay. So like there wasn't much that someone could really like stream snipe you or figure out. Like everything was too far ahead that you weren't gonna be able to like cheat and ruin someone's game. But as a new player, it was cool to be able to kind of like see that without all of the like additional streamer commentary, or only just looking at one view. You can move around the map. So just in general, I thought this was like a cool addition to Call of Duty, and it reminded me a lot of those like early days of League of Legends and all. So
Interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. I never used that tool very much, but I always remember every day I would flip through those games and just see what was being played at those levels and be like, oh, okay, so like this is kind of the meta.
I would watch a lot of them when I was like waiting for people to hop on. I would
there you go.
If I like hopped on and like someone was like, oh, like I'll be on in 15 minutes, I'd be like, oh, I'm popping in to watch one of the. I didn't go into the practice tool or like
I don't think there
this
was one back then. I think it was just tutorial or ARAM.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if ARAM was around at the time. I think I didn't even hop into like blind matches or anything. So,
I mean, just watching better players play is such a good way to learn. Like
oh,
even
yeah.
Sarah, when she's been playing Hunt, like it's funny the progression of it. But now she's like in quick plays and the solo bounty hunt, and when if she gets killed, she'll just spectate the players and just watch them, and she'll catch things and pick up on things.
Nice.
So yeah, I think spectate can just be like a really valuable tool.
Yeah, I think it's a cool option to be able to like see, and it's nice. It was nice in the old league client to be able to do that without having to like watch a specific like person's point of view, like if
Right.
you pull up Twitch or whatever. But on to some Formula One news. Just some real quick notes. Las Vegas Grand Prix is going to be on the calendar until 2032. So a long contract was signed for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. It'll be around for a while. So that'll be a pretty cool thing to have as like a yearly thing. I'm hoping I'm just hoping that the track actually ends up being like a good circuit to watch, and they didn't lock in a 10-year deal on a track that blows. Like
Sure.
if it just sucks and you're like, oh, you can't pass anyone and all, like, yeah, they can change it slightly, but I'm just hoping it's a good circuit for that. But yeah, long contract for that.
Yeah, that's I I hope I don't I hope I'm not around that long. That sounds so far into the future. I'm like, God damn, I can't even think about that. That's crazy.
It's so far, and but I think it's nice to like have some things locked in for a while, whereas we're
Sure.
year after year going like, oh, like this calendar or this track was renewed for one more year, and like next year, oh, it was renewed again or whatever. But there was just moving along in F1 notes. So there was an interview with Sergio Perez, kind of talking about some of the struggles he had towards the end of the year, and he basically was saying that he and the team have worked a lot during the off season to figure out like what went wrong in terms of the direction that they would go for in terms of like car setup and things like that. Because the like headline thing that I saw initially was that Sergio Perez said he was pushing the team in a certain direction, and it's like that is so like minimal in what it sounds like, but you could imagine it means so many things. But it just sounds like he wanted the car to be set up a certain way that was comfortable for his driving, but that wasn't necessarily the optimal setup for the car. So they did a lot of evaluating and have been working, because he really is looking to improve and hopefully be able to be a bit more competitive in terms of his teammate rivalry and also in the championship. So I think that was a cool thing to see, that they're like, you don't often get to see a lot of what the drivers are doing in the off season to kind of prepare and push themselves forward in the seasons. You see a lot of, oh, the car, the engine, this, that, but you don't really see as much from the drivers. So I thought that was a neat little insight into what he's got going on.
Yeah, and I think there's very few people on the grid who can offer like good commentary on. Pardon me while I dig gold out of my ear. I think there's like few people who can comment on driver style well on the broadcast to give you a sense of like what the drivers do prefer, what their driving style is, because sometimes I think that is like quite difficult to get a handle on. And if I understand the differences correctly, I believe Max wanted what they called like a very pointy front end, where like small inputs from the wheel direct the front of the car precisely where I think Sergio preferred maybe a looser front end that gave you like more stability in the rear. And depending on how those garages work, the cars can only lean, one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so finding that balance, I imagine, would be like pretty tough between the two drivers and the two engineer squads.
Yeah, and also looking at it, like, I think we don't get much information on that in general for setup because things are kept so tight-lipped about like how they're setting up cars, because obviously you don't want your competition to be like gleaning any information on what can possibly give them a leg up on you, or maybe if you're doing really really well, like how they can set up their car, try to like direct the engineering of their car to kind of match that, to catch up in a sense. Like when teams figure out something new in League of Legends, or something new meta, or new picks that are like really strong or whatever, like teams see that and jump on that so quick because it's very visible. You're able to be like, oh, they're picking this champion, and oh, that's really strong against this that was really strong. So like now it like opens the door, and then you're looking for, oh well, if that's really strong now because it beats this other thing that was a heavily picked thing, then like what beats that? And that's how the meta evolves in League of Legends. But in motor racing, like it's like you're kind of like, oh well, it looks like that car maybe has a little more rake than it did last week. The back end's a little higher, so they swapped out the rear wing for a slightly wider wing because they want to have a little bit more maneuverability in these tight turns on this track, as opposed to like wanting the downforce or the arrow of the wing for these tracks with this long straight on it or whatever. Like you can see you have to really like look a lot closer with an F1 car to try and distinguish like these setup differences that maybe are making a difference. So,
And do you think it seems it's less like meta game? It seems like it's less metagame and more like comparable to just like preference and style, where I don't think a driver is going to change their style based on what they see other people doing. I think you're right. That's where the car changes come into play. But that doesn't necessarily account for like the driver preference.
yeah, that's true. And like with this, it's like looking at Checo's car next to Max's car, if they have all the same upgrades and everything, like we're probably not going to be able to tell what the differences are. So I think it's good to see that he's like learning and looking at it more analytically and saying, hey, maybe the way that I wanted to drive this car just was not the most optimal way, and we can work to improve on that, and I can maybe find a way to suit myself more to the optimal setup and whatnot. But looking at some of the car reveals and whatnot that came through, so the Alfa Romeo had its first little test run, and it does not have the little pointy bits on the side of the car, so that was just to look fucking sweet in that car launch. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be a concern. So it was something that, of course, we're looking at. Another bit of news, and I want to hear a quick bit from you on this, but Fernando Alonso this week said that Lance is a driver who is super young, super talented, and has the possibility to be a world champion. He has the speed, he has the talent, he's shown it many times, especially in wet conditions. And personally, I don't see it. I think he is a average to above average driver in general. I don't see in a lot of cases a reason that he would lose his seat, but not world championship potential from the guy. But yeah, Fernando apparently sees it differently or is just really trying to kiss ass to the team owner.
Yeah, sounds like somebody was paid to say that because the last example of Lance having like advantage in the wet, he gave it away just, I am pretty sure, on unforced errors. So he would have to give a reaffirming performance to say like, okay, this is who he is in 2023. Because all I can think of, I don't want to say that was that Monaco.
Might have
I
been.
I don't even remember what track it was, but Lance like had the advantage for a while. He was leading for like a good amount of laps and then just like fell apart in the closing
That was
stages.
like 2 years ago. I'm not even
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I can't remember which track it was.
but like that's our last example of Lance like being out in front and having a good like position in a race, and he totally squandered it. So you're right. I'm kind of not up there with Alonso. I would have to see another like really level-headed stellar performance from Lance. Even put it like P4 just like on a
Yeah,
consistent drive, and I'd be
like
like, okay, so maybe he has like leveled up and could be something.
right.
But world champion potential, dude, not with the other drivers that are on the grid right now. I don't see him taking many boards off of a Lando Norris, a George Russell, a Max, a Sergio. There's too many slots up there for him to fit in,
Yeah.
especially in that car, is what it seems like.
Yeah, and I think like Lando is the most applicable comparison because the McLaren car, at least this past year, was
Right.
pretty sorry compared to how it's been in previous years. They really did take a step back, but even in that instance, Lando was not only consistently finishing pretty well, when the car was there for him, to a decent capacity, but consistently beating his teammate, putting in just some crazy laps that like should not have been possible in the car, and like we haven't seen that from Lance.
Right.
So I don't really know about that. We also had Nick DeVries and Yuki Tsunoda on the kiss cam at an NBA game. Just
Sadly didn't kiss.
no kiss. But we did have the Alpha Tauri car release and reveal this week. I think it's a decent looking car. I think we will have to go back through as we get all of the cars revealed, to kind of look at our favorites. It's very similar in my mind to how the livery looked, but a lot more red thrown in there, which I think is interesting. Like, I don't think of red as being an AlphaTauri team color over the past couple of years since they switched from Toro Rosso. But I think it looks like a decent car, not too different. Any initial thoughts?
Well, it seems like, the red is coming from the Orland sponsorship, and it's like a pretty interesting highlight color, but I don't think I mean, whatever. If that was me putting it on there, I think it would be maybe like a darker shade of red. But yeah, overall, I think it looks pretty sweet. I like the little wheel covers. They'll be spinning red when they're moving all fast. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I mean, it's just a good looking car.
Yeah, and I think that's part of my problem looking at all these is I just kind of think they all look sweet. But we also had the McLaren reveal of their car, a little less, I think a little less of the blue than we've had in previous years, but I thought that they used it to highlight pretty well. They also have the chrome sponsorship not only on the wheels, but to the sides of the driver, on that engine air intake on the front wing. So big Google boys over there at the McLaren garage. But again, I think a nice looking car, but none of these cars have really drastically changed from previous years. So just another sharp car.
Sure, yeah, and like you said, I mean, you hit the nail on the head last week, where most of the development is on the underbody, is on the floor.
Yeah.
So the sweet stuff we're not really gonna see unless you flip that bad boy over. But even then, like, I'm no engineer, I'm no like racing
Oh
really
yeah.
like smart guy yet, so I can't say like, oh, those side pods look like they're going to be too heavy for the left-handed tracks. And honestly, I think the air intake's just going to be a bit too light. It looks like that McLaren's really going to have some cooling problems, and honestly, the engine, it just looks like it's sitting too far back. I mean, they're just gonna have drag issues in the late stage of the races when you're carrying that much weight around. So yeah, honestly, from a competitive standpoint, this McLaren, it's just not doing it for me.
Yeah.
I want to be able to give that kind of analysis.
Yeah, and I just don't think that these car reveals, because even the parts that we are looking at and going, oh, that looks interesting and everything, that they go and throw it out on the track and it's gone. And we're like, oh, I guess it was just to look cool. But looking at the kind of final two car reveals, the Ferrari and Mercedes, both I think look fucking sweet. They haven't the Ferrari car hasn't drastically changed, but I do love the rear wing having the Ferrari sponsor right there across. I think it's a really sharp looking car. But the Mercedes, I do really jive with that is, I do also appreciate the differentiation between the cars in terms of the highlight colors for the numbers and whatnot. Like Lewis has that yellow, George gets that highlighter green. I think that is like something I'd love to see other teams adopt, to be able to better differentiate which car is coming around, and not being like, especially like in the beginning of the race, being like, oh, and that's the this car. Like,
right.
The Red Bull is getting ahead of the Ferrari. It's like, well, is it Checo? Is it Max? Like, in that all that craziness, if there's someone who tags someone at the beginning and dust kicks up in the air, like, you don't know who's who coming through there.
Right.
But yeah, I think the Mercedes look really sharp, and so the other thing with these two car launches is just the huge difference in the bodies that is visible. You have the very wide, thin side pods there on the Ferrari, and Mercedes has continued with their no side pod design that if they can make it work and really nail that down with the aero development and everything, I think could be a nice bonus for them. But thus far, we just haven't quite seen it there. So maybe they've continued development and they're going to just come out like lightning. But very, very different cars when you look at them head on there.
Yeah, and based on the performance of the Ferrari last season, going with that scoop design, it seemed like it was a pretty good way to set up your car. I'm surprised Mercedes maybe didn't. What should I say? Maybe didn't move like further in that direction, but they seem to have appreciated what they did last year and just kind of working along that, because especially, and this is kind of how I'm trying to align my thinking, is based on what team principals usually say in interviews when prompted about other teams, is it sounds like they don't really notice from a general standpoint. They're not like looking for notes. They definitely take notice, but they're not saying like, oh, we should look to copy that. They're just kind of like, yeah,
Right.
they're doing what they're doing. So yeah, I often take those thoughts of mine with a grain of salt, where it's like, well, they're not necessarily like looking to steal engineering notes. They've already done
No,
their homework.
yeah. No, I find it very interesting because this is like kind of what we've discussed a little bit with the teams in terms of like, oh, all the cars just look very the same, and this team copied that team's previous year's car design or whatever. These cars look so different. I think the design going without the side pods, my biggest curiosity with that is how much weight do you save? Because
Yeah, no, that's a good
when
point.
you're looking at those things and the minuscule differences in weight and everything, having just all that extra carbon fiber material for those side pods is just a lot of extra weight that Mercedes seems to have cut out if it gives them the same speed as the Ferrari in general or the same horsepower. Just having the lighter frame will give them tenths in terms of time. So two pretty cool looking cars that have some pretty different designs. So I'm very excited to get into the season. I know we all are itching to be back, but
Big time.
I'm very curious to see how that Mercedes does when it comes out.
Yeah, I based on the news, I think there's some work to do. I think the two drivers had a initial shakedown recently of the
It
vehicle.
was, I think, this morning. Yeah,
Gotcha. And yeah, so obviously they're always going to say things to change. They're never going to say like, "Oh yeah, we've got a winning car here. No no more development necessary."
yeah. I think the issues they had this morning, from what I was reading, look like they are solvable. Based on what I saw, it looks like there was something that was mounted incorrectly with the engine to the chassis, so which caused the engine to not really or to have like misfirings and things like that. So it's probably something that's relatively fixable. Something not so fixable for the rest of the grid is that Lewis also said that he is planning to stay a little bit longer when talking about his future with Mercedes. So he is going to be sticking around. He has that. The man is just a competitor, and I will. It will be a sad day when he leaves the grid. I think it will be a. I see Lewis as being someone who will leave on a relatively high note and not just kind of meander around the grid like not to say that Kimi Räikkönen, like I love Kimi Räikkönen, but he was doing it for fun at the end and like really didn't have the drive to get back to a world championship level. But he was still a great driver. But I don't see Lewis being like, I'm still good, so I'll just like go in like a lower tier car and all. Like I think Lewis is gonna leave on a pretty high note, and so I think that will leave a pretty big hole in the competition of the Formula One grid. So it's exciting to see him saying he's going to be around a bit longer, because I know it'll be a sad day for the grid when he does decide to retire.
Well, and the same goes for any like pillar of a sport. Once the goat, or not, I don't want to use that term. Once the top competitor of an era decides to retire, or change goals or whatever, it does become kind of like a closing chapter, or the start of something new, because then there's a bit of a vacuum for that player. You're kind of searching for the player, the driver that is going to be the it guy to look at, that's going to like draw those eyes and be like an ambassador for the sport, and just the guy that wins, the Tom
Yeah.
Brady of the orgs. But yeah.
And I think the other thing that crossed my mind is that I don't imagine that there is going to be a large gap of time between when Lewis retires from Formula One and when Max retires from Formula One. Based on everything that Max has said, I don't think he plans to be a 15-year on the grid kind of guy. I think
Right.
he maybe looks to peace out after, I don't know, 10 years or so, where he's been around since like 2015 or so, and so, or 2016 maybe. He might just be like, yeah, all right, 2025, like, or whenever his contract's up, to just be like, hey, I'm good, I'm gonna go pursue other things. So I would imagine that the potential vacuum of space in a short amount of time might be just massive if they both decide to leave at similar times.
Well, I think a beautiful thing would be if one of them leaves first and the answer from the other is like, well, I'm retiring too then. Like, if he's not staying, I'm not staying.
Yeah.
Like they would see each other as like their only competition. They're the only thing worth driving against. They're the only thing that, like, yeah, he's the only one that can beat me. Like, why?
Yeah.
Like, that to me is like a beautiful relationship where these guys have like taken each other out on the grid, just like animosity and tension and championships.
Yeah.
But in the end, they're both like, well, yeah, that's the only reason I'm doing it, is because he's the only guy that could like take races from me.
Yeah, I just want to beat that fucker.
Well, exactly, because you've already beaten everybody else every single time. At a certain
Right.
point, you would just be like victory lapping every race.
Yeah. No, I think that is cool. It's just it's a weird thought, because for at least our time being in Formula One, I don't know if we've had. I think Seb is the biggest retirement that we've had, or biggest person leaving the grid, and we weren't even paying attention to the sport when Seb was at his greatest. So it's like, it's kind of a difference in looking at that. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to a couple more years at least of Lewis and Max getting after it. Nonetheless, we do have our team previews to get into. I think that leads us pretty well into your team preview here with the Mercedes team here.
At my team this week, like you said, I have Mercedes, and if you're in the market for, do I want a partner older than me? I don't know. Do I want a partner much younger than me? I'm not so sure. There's beauty and pros and cons in each of them. Oh man, if I go young, oh boy, just think of that. But you go with a little more experience, a little bit of gray on the muzzle. I mean, what could happen here? And with my team this week, Mercedes, you can get the best of both worlds. You get the young stud and the old experienced, tried and true racer. But, and I'll just give you the quick hits here. So Mercedes started in 1970. They took the spot of, because as I'm now understanding, like the pedigree is like who you bought the team from, and like how the org changed hands. But they describe that as like, oh, but that's like the history of this team, even though it's owned here.
Right.
They have this spot, which is like actually kind of interesting. So that's kind of why I've been laying it out this way, because that's kind of the way that the data is being told as well. So they started in 1970. It has roots in the old Tyrrell squad and the old BAR teams, which was a British American tobacco company. So it was Big Tobacco putting money into this Formula One squad.
Big Tobacco has been a huge Formula One sponsor.
Oh, I know, like, because wasn't it Marlboro McLaren?
Yeah,
for a long time,
and Ferrari they were a big sponsor of for a while. Like those, it's been gas company,
yep.
petrol companies, and tobacco companies for as long as anyone can remember.
They say the world runs on Dunkin'. No, the world runs on tobacco and petrol.
There you go.
And it is evident in like the owners of this squad. But so the team history dates all the way back to the 30s, where Mercedes-Benz competed in Grand Prix racing. They had 2 winning years in 54, or dates back to the 30s, and then made a return in 54 and 55 with Fangio at the French Grand Prix, had 2 winning years in 54 and 55. And then the rest of the Mercedes like competition team, most of their success comes like in the modern age. Like you can kind of ignore a whole lot of that. It's basically just like boring history. And then they really don't start winning until like 2012. So they re-enter the fold 2010. 2012 comes along. Well, I should say it's actually pretty notable. 2010, they had Nico Rosberg and Michael Schumacher when he returned to the sport. 2010, 2011, 2012, nothing really of note. Michael Schumacher ends up pretty frustrated as he's like really not able to get a whole lot done. And then I believe it's 2012 at the Malaysian or no, it's the 2010 Malaysian Grand Prix where Nico scores a podium, and then I believe he doesn't win until 2012. So all sorts of just kind of like middling history for Mercedes, kind of until Nico and Lewis enter the fold, and they really elevated Mercedes to like what we think of today. Like, you know, you could say that just man on the street to anybody and they'll be like, oh yeah, they're like top of the thing, but they've only been for very recently. So what we know of Mercedes is a very like modern streak of just winning. Like they have 8 world championships. They have 116 P1s. Dude, literally every other team I've talked about has had like 1 P1. Yeah. 1 or like maybe 2. And it's like really exciting. And that's what I spent my whole time talking about. Dude, these guys have 116 wins. 116. That's literally Nico, Lewis, and Valtteri. There are not like a whole lot of drivers that have like been on this squad. So this is a team that just fucking wins.
Yeah, very quick rise to power. They did not fuck around too long after getting going with Jenson Button and who else was there?
Oh, you're right. That's the name that I missed.
Yeah, but Jenson Button was not like winning much for the team, if at all. I don't think that was the early years of Mercedes where they were really a midfield car. But you're right, like Lewis and Nico, that was kind of the jump start to a lot of success from the team.
Yeah, crazy. 116 P1s, 128 pole positions, 91 fastest laps. So we all know what happened in 2021. Tragedy, heartbreak, no matter which side of the fence you're on. But 2022 is probably their like, one would argue like their worst year in their like recent history. However, it was an incredibly upward trajectory. We couldn't help but sing their praises all of last year. We saw a rising George Russell. We saw a a team working Lewis Hamilton. He was in much different form than we've seen him in previously, but still seemed to be like excelling at that new role of like experimental team helper driver who's going to do the off strategy kind of thing, where George Russell then was just left to like, oh, sorry, I'm actually I forgot my role is George Russell. I'm just supposed to be in P4 or greater in literally every single race I'm a part of. So going into next year, they have a driver who is pretty used to winning, but helped Russell win. And then also you have George Russell, who all he did was succeed last year, ended on a high note. One of the last races of last year, George Russell gets a dub, his first Formula One race win formally. So they rise the whole year, end on a massive high. So I think we can only really expect great things out of Mercedes going into next year. And like from a fan's perspective, you would say like we hope Mercedes is back to their winning ways, and all of the evidence really points to that being the case. Because even in 2022's position, where you may have had some negative connotations to your commentary about a Mercedes, they still ended up as one of the top teams on the grid. And for some reason people just still had like this negative take about it, and like, oh, but they're not even in not the best, even not being at the top of the grid position, they were still the best at not being at the top of the grid.
Yep.
So I think that says something about like the team's work ethic, the organization, the organizational skills of the teams. Just the whole thing is all firing on all cylinders. Even if they're not getting the dubs, they're at least doing not getting wins better than anybody else.
Yeah, they were the best of the rest and competing for wins at the end of last season. And how dare you not include George Russell's one win in that 116 win count, putting it all to Lewis and Valtteri and Nico. How dare you? No.
Sure. Good joke. But you get what I'm saying, where it was like a small amount of people are making this very large number.
Oh, absolutely. No, yeah. It's
But you're right. Yes, George did win one of them. Oh gosh.
No, it's incredible, like really what they've done in Formula One. It is not easy to continue winning for that long. I mean, Red Bull had their 4-year spurt when they had Seb getting his 4 world championships, and then Mercedes very quickly eclipsed that. Like, it's very easy for teams at the top of the grid to figure things out and overtake someone just enough to, and it's like in the recent history of Formula One, once you're in heavily into the Mercedes years of being dominant and all, yeah, there weren't other teams really competing for the constructors, but in that 2015, 2016, like earlier on, there are battles for those world championship points and everything. And so Mercedes, they have a great structure of a team. They really have built that up over in a very short amount of time to be so successful, and it's super, super impressive.
Yeah, and to be honest, it was a really fun team to learn about. I didn't really understand where Mercedes like came from. I didn't know the roots, so that was pretty fun to get into. But yeah, your team you're not Ferrari this week, are you?
I'm not. They are next week. I had the boys over at Alpine, the Frenchmen. Yes. And so looking at this team, they've got 2 race winners, not something that most of the grid can say. And so looking at their history similarly, this is the team slot that had the Benetton slot where Michael Schumacher won his Constructors' Championship and two of his Drivers' Championships. Renault then purchased the team. After Renault, it became Lotus Renault. Then back to Renault, then now over to Alpine. But with their time as Alpine, they have seen some decent success in their 2 seasons officially as an Alpine team. And like I said, 2 race winners, but also only being a official Alpine team for 2 years, they're also making steps forward in other areas of their organization. They are taking on an Alpine Academy lineup, so they're not just trying to produce good quality at the F1 level with their drivers, but they're also taking on Formula 2 Jack Doohan, and who's a multiple-time race winner in Formula 2. They brought in the reigning Formula 3 champion Victor Martins, who will be part of the Alpine Academy lineup, racing for ART in Formula 2 this year. They also brought in Nikola Solov, who is one of the young, promising drivers who's going to be with ART in the Formula 3 grid. So they're starting to really look at these younger drivers and look to try and build the kind of structure as some of these larger teams that you see with Mercedes having their Mercedes Academy that you saw George Russell benefit from to get his slot with Williams after being the Formula 2 champion, getting that time in the grid to accustom himself in Formula 1 and then move up to that Mercedes slot. So Alpine is going to similarly be looking to build some of these young drivers into bigger talents down the line to potentially fill slots as they need to in the future. And I think that's a really cool thing that not every team has and is really putting an effort into, or at least maybe didn't as quickly as Alpine has, taking their slot on the grid here. But looking at the 2 drivers they have, Esteban Ocon has been driving in Formula 1 for a few years now. He was a test driver, a reserve driver initially. He raced for Force India, then Racing Point. He was a test driver then for Mercedes on their main team in 2019 as part of their Mercedes Young Driver program. Then rejoined the F1 grid at Renault, and then with Alpine was able to go out and get a win at the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix, where after a lot of chaos, Valtteri taking out people who then took out people who then took out other people in a big crazy mishmash, we end up with a little bit of rain out on the track. Everyone switches tires as soon as Lewis Hamilton gets past the pit lane entry, and Lewis is just hung out to dry, or hung out to wet, I guess, as it were, with the wrong tires, and Mr. Esteban Ocon was able to hold off some very good drivers behind him to go ahead and take his first and thus far only race win. In similar style, we have Pierre Gasly, who, when he is at AlphaTauri, gets his first race win, is able to bring that that experience to this Alpine team this year. Both of them Frenchmen, Alpine, a French team. I think that is really, really cool in terms of the sponsorships and the potential for their organization to really just like have this cohesion and drive of not just this is our team, but this is our country. This is like what we are racing for, who we are racing for. I think that motivation from the team really will drive them forward. And Pierre Gasly, as well as Esteban Ocon, someone who has been a part of the grid for a bit, has had their ups and downs similarly. We've seen him at his lows. We've seen him lose his seat at Red Bull to Alex Albon, as we saw Esteban Ocon lose his seat and become a test driver for Mercedes. We've seen these guys go from these positions on the grid to losing that, struggling a bit, and then still coming back from their drive and determination to be successful. And so I think that this grid, this team on the grid has a lot of potential, a lot of promise. I think the Alpine car this past season was a very, very quick car. Obviously, they finished fourth on the grid, and having two young, talented drivers in those positions who are not just freshmen out there trying to make sense of the F1 world. They're coming in as young guys with talent who have gotten the opportunity to have experience that they're bringing to this team to propel them forward at that top of the midfield kind of slot. So I'm looking for them to continue that moving forward, and really I do expect them to be very successful this coming year, whether that is top of the midfield successful to potentially I would not be shocked to see them pick up a podium here or there if the car is able to maintain the level that it was this past year.
Yeah, especially with the fact that like you had said, we've seen these drivers do it before. So given the proper weaponry, I think they'll be more than capable to do it again for their French brothers.
Absolutely. So I'm excited. They've had their history, kind of like Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg. They've cropped each other out of Instagram photos where someone took the picture of both guys with their girlfriends or the posse or whatever, and they've cropped out each other. They've had some beef from collisions back in the day, from what I have meandered through some history of potentially stolen girlfriends and this and that, young person drama, high school type drama from way back in the day. But they seem to be putting that in the past and really moving forward as a team this year. But I think similarly to the Haas team, there were a couple question marks that popped up, question mark pings popping up above their heads. But they are moving forward and looking to bring some continued success to this Alpine team.
Damn, I'm curious, being Eskimo brothers, if there's an element of the pillow talk that like they don't care about, like, comparing sizes. They would just get frustrated if the girl would be like, he said he was faster than you by like 210.
He's got 2/10 on you, not 2
They don't
inches.
care about inches. They care about tenths.
Sorry, I guess in Europe it would be centimeters, but
there you go.
way. Yeah. That's funny.
No, you don't understand. Like, it was cold out that day.
It was the tires were gold.
There you go.
But yeah, I think the Alpine team, I think they have two very good drivers. I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully, for one, Pierre Gasly return to having some really good performances after the AlphaTauri kind of took a step back and he struggled this past year. I expect him to be back to competing very fervently with Esteban Ocon and seeing the two kind of duke it out in that tight rivalry there.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting new squad for them. Definitely like a new what would you say, like a new identity for them, and I think that's going to be really really fun and exciting to watch for 2023. But yeah, we
Absolutely.
got just two final teams to talk over. I imagine Aaron will be your Red Bull expert for next week,
I was
and
thinking
I'll
the opposite, just because
really.
I think it would be fun for you to go through that and all. But we'll see. We'll talk about it a little bit later.
But yeah, two more teams to talk about. We've got Ferrari and Red Bull coming up next week. And then, thank gosh, after that, we will be like right into the 2023 season. So hopefully these team breakdowns have been helpful and, can kind of prepare us for with the info of what to expect moving into this season. Especially, we've seen a bunch of car reveals and whatnot as well. So we're pretty primed and ready going into the season.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of was our goal to lead up into it pretty well. But we do have some League of Legends to get to. Justin, where would you like to start today? Want to start at the bottom and work our way up?
Yeah, that works for me. Because
Sounds.
the 100 Thieves versus Team Liquid game, I thought was pretty interesting. There's from a draft perspective, pretty similar to what we've been seeing. But if you want to start in the pick and ban for the Liquid and Thieves game.
Yeah, so looking at the two teams during their pick and ban here, we're seeing a lot of things that are kind of standard. You're seeing the Zeri, you're seeing the Elise get banned out. But of course, Bjergsen still drawing the zillion bans.
Which to me is just silly.
Just call it Cillian, man, because that just doesn't make sense. It is. I don't really understand like how that can be such a concerning pocket pick, but we're seeing it in North America, and I will have to say, so I watched the LCK series, then I watched the LPL series, like these all back to back, and then I watched the LCS game that we picked. And I was sitting there watching the LCS game and just going, "Oh, we're bad." I was like,
Yeah.
I was sitting there, and it's not just like, it's not necessarily entirely quality of players, but the game just seems so much slower and so more indecisive from what we're seeing over in the LCK and the LPL. Like watching them so like close together, just back to back to back, just gave me such a brutal picture of North America. And I'm not hating or anything right now. I think that, like I said, there's a lot of talent, but going into this game, a very interesting like set of picks. We're seeing the double ranged bot lanes from both sides, which I think is something that we'll continue to see a little bit here and there, but it was kind of an interesting mix for those. You have mega range from the Caitlyn and Varus. You have I think a weird pairing. The Sivir Ashe, I don't think in my mind makes the best pairing, because I think the Sivir DPS and just getting lots of those shurikens thrown out there and everything is really her forte. where I think with the Ashe, like you're looking to just create tons of CC where you can just layer it between the two champions. You can throw down a Verisol and then immediately put a Caitlyn trap underneath the person and really just continue this lockdown that allows for you to just blow someone up very easily. I think it's a weird mix there. But I did like to see on the side of TL the Pioshik on the Maokai. I think that is a super strong pick, as we'll see going into the LPL and LCK a little bit too. But yeah, very I guess like similar drafts across the board. Very brawly in the top lane, tanky in the jungle. These ranged mages in the mid lane and the double range support. So really, it did kind of come down off the bat to a skill gap in terms of these teams playing against each other from the beginning after the draft.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. One of the first things that stood out to me was the I can't think of the word. The like top lane mismatch between Summit's Renekton and Tenacity's Jax at some point. I think it was like the 12, 13 minute mark. Summit had like a 40 CS gap on Tenacity, and then just as quickly looking down, Tenacity then just solo kills Summit because he got like a little too close under turret. Tenacity was just able to run him down. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, there's a world where that 40 CS gap was just everything. Pioshik just comes top every time and they just like push it down. But they did nothing with that lead. Tenacity, like without closer, is just able to get that solo kill. And now all of a sudden he's like kind of back in the game. And now they have to like worry about this guy. So like, what were your thoughts about that? Because I thought that was a total, like, just total missed opportunity. Like, what were they doing?
Well, it just like flipped the script of the game, because you're early on, you're seeing Closer and Pioshik are like not really doing much different. It's pretty even in the mid lane early. They're both looking to just like scale. The bot laners just don't have enough damage really early to do that much. And Team Liquid had the initial lead. They got the first blood, and all it took was overextending that one time for Tenacity to take that, and then just kind of take the money and run. Like, started building quickly to get advantages over Summit in the top lane there. I think as I was seeing the team fights kind of play out, one of the biggest things that I saw as they were grouping and looking to fight over objectives was just the big difference between the bot lanes in terms of their range, because you're seeing, like I said, the Sivir Ashe, it's a ranged matchup, but like I had kind of previously said, I think typically you see like the Ashe and the Varus together, where you're getting like a lot of poke damage, range, you have that lockdown from both ultimates, and the range that Doublelift had on the Caitlyn versus the Sivir, and similarly where Busio and Core JJ have a relatively close range to each other on the Ashe and the Varus. 100 Thieves was just able to put out so much damage without getting touched initially in these team fights. And they were able to really, really push those advantages to be able to start taking some like macro advantages around the map as well. And so like having the top lane lead, having that bot lane range advantage that kind of turns into a bot lane lead. I mean, Bjergsen just really had it easy in this matchup. He just got to kind of sit there, scale up, throw down some great walls, but yeah, I think the pick and ban just left and after the initial outplay from Tenacity on Summit, just kind of left 100 Thieves with a pretty solid advantage.
Yeah, I would agree. And like I see what they were going for with the Sivir Ash, where you get the Sivir ult, speed up your squad, and the Ash to just like pick and engage when you want it, and then you have the movement speed to follow up. I definitely get that. I think there was a lot of counterplay for that type of movement. With Bjergsen with the walls, like you could see Sivir ult be popped, and then just like you can't run through the wall. It doesn't matter how quick
Right.
you are. So yeah, it was an interesting little duo. I don't think it worked out that well. You're right. I think Bjergsen was pretty cruise control throughout most of the game, although obviously his walls were solid
Oh,
in the fights that he
huge.
showed up for, just cut off huge swaths of the battlefield, and secured 100 Thieves, like mostly just positioning, which is just as good as getting kills in those scenarios. It's hilarious to look at a team full of deathless thieves and just look at Busio, who clearly has just like never played a day in his life. Like this guy's just doing reckless things. I feel like I want to see cleaner support play, and we're just not getting it out of these guys.
I would agree with Busio having to be a little bit more cautious. He got caught out a little bit a few times, but I think that there were some positives from Team Liquid's side. They were able to get a pick on, I believe it was Tenacity, and then turn that into two mid lane turrets and pushing down to the inhib turret a little bit, getting some damage. So they had these moments where they were taking advantage of the opportunities that they got, but overall the play from 100 Thieves was just very, very well played out, very clean, not only with the Talia ults and blocking off sections of the map like they did in the team fight at Dragon, but that allowed the range damage that we were seeing from Busio and Doublelift to really benefit them in that initial fight. But also Doublelift just laying down these Caitlyn trap lines that
Yep.
were sectioning off the dragon from fights. Between the two of those things, I would have just been so annoyed being on
Yeah, the zone
Team
control.
Liquid. Like it was brutal, and there was not much that that could be done. And then of course Team Liquid being behind just went for some kind of crazy. I felt like they didn't have a they didn't have a way back into the game once they
Sure.
got behind.
Sure.
We saw Hiri try to TP on the Azir behind 100 Thieves to hopefully come in and get an Azir ult on them, get that big Shurima shuffle and just get annihilated. And then Doublelift was just too big once it got later in the game that it didn't really matter what happened. It was just a kind of foregone conclusion. If Doublelift didn't die, the game is over.
Sure. Yeah, he played quite a strong game. I think his engages around the neutral objectives were, pretty solid. That wall of traps that you get on the entrance to the pit is like quite hard to deal with depending on what your comp is, and especially like a Maokai Renekton that has to just like walk at you.
Yeah,
You're pretty well locked out. So yeah, GG's to 100 Thieves in that position.
definitely. I thought that was pretty impressive play from them. Where do you want to go next? Do you want to hop over to China or to Korea?
Well, you said you did Korea, China, LCS. So let's do LCS, China, Korea.
Sounds good. So for the LPL, the matchup we were looking at was LNG versus OMG. And so initially in game one, LNG just had one of the big things that I was impressed with was their macro play. They were able to really kind of take their control that they had in the bot lane of the strong Draven damage that they have from LP and the CC from Hong, and just kind of push that into taking free Dragon initially, forcing OMG off their bot lane turret for what felt like an eternity, just not allowing them to, just letting like wave after wave die to the bot lane turret and putting OMG behind. And there really wasn't much that OMG could do there. They had Tarzan on the Elise. They just had too much damage in that matchup, and really utilized it well to kind of propel them forward. LNG, like, and they just continued to push these, like, this strong objective control. They get the Dragon Soul. They go and start posturing for the Baron. End up just losing the Baron in a smite fight, which really set them back a bit. But in general, they played just a really clean macro play. I also really, really liked the Jace mid and the Gwen top lane picks that they had going, and having that Jace mid with the very strong split pushing AP top laner, I think is a really nice matchup, because they did have a lot of good engage, but between the Jace and the Draven, they had it's so hard to itemize on the OMG side against so much heavy AD damage, and then just the AP damage coming out of the Gwen and the Elise. So I was just very impressed with kind of the coming out hot out of the gate with LNG.
Yeah, and that's just a great thing to say about it. Because I really like the plan. I really like the draft. The Nautilus Elise is just super aggressive, offers up a good amount of roams, and then interestingly, you have Scout on the Jace, who, like, to help out that bottom side aggression, you don't even have to come all the way in. You can just shoot your shock blast, like, from the jungle, and, like, still be offering help, but not dedicate, like, so much time. So I just like the amount of, like, roam potential and aggression that they had for the team comp. And then they have so much neutral control that they're just able to stack up 4 Drakes, keep OMG off, and just like you said, just played out really strong team fights, really aggressive, and took game 1.
Yeah, and even after OMG took that Baron and stole it away from them, they just were like, okay, we're just going to close it out and slowly cause OMG to bleed out from this. They're like, we're going to just continue to push as many lanes as we can, take as many objectives, jungle control, everything, and just suffocate you back into your base instead of trying to go for some big grand gesture that's gonna take it all. They're just like, nah, we went for that and it didn't work, so we're just gonna, like, choke you out now. But coming into game 2, OMG had a solid team fight comp, in my opinion. Looking at the Cassante, they have some displacement there. They have the displacement from the Maokai, PP God on the Renata with the handshake. So you're setting up a lot of potential for the Yone to be able to get the ultimate off with a lot of tankiness from your surrounding comp. So you're not just like, oh, well, if we get this engaged, the top laner dies or this person dies. Like, you're setting yourself up to be able to dive in, get this displacement, allow Varus to hit from the outside, allow Yone to get ultimates. And I was really just impressed with that, their team comp and kind of cohesion there. I felt like LNG with their draft tried to do something pretty similar in terms of the style, but I really liked OMG's matchup in terms of just the way that everything worked together from the get-go.
Yeah, and from the OMG perspective, I think one of the elements that shined is Shanji on the Kesante. Like the amount of disruption that he had in the fight against against the immobile ads of Jin and Ash. Like he was just annihilating team fights because they couldn't really like move around him. He just demands so much space, and just taking out these two ads, which Jin and Ash in this position, other than the on click from Renekton and the alt from Sejuani, there's not a whole lot of other like consistent CC. So you take those two ADs out, the root from Jin and the alt and slow from Ash, and you really begin to not lock down. OMG becomes free to like run around once those elements are gone. So I think Shanji playing kind of backline disruption was really strong in these team fights, and you can see how a champion like that, like you can just see why Kesanti is so powerful. He just does not seem to die and just wrecks these carries and can just find them from so far away. And from OMG's side, I think Shanji was really, really strong at doing that in the game.
Yeah, and I was very impressed by like his just laning and then team fighting as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But OMG, just throughout the game was able to kind of continue to stay ahead. They were getting picks and not losing people against a very good LNG team who had not lost a single game up until this point.
Right.
LNG were trying to set up objectives first, but just not really being able to entirely close OMG off from them. We saw LNG just winning fights, but then kind of faltering slightly after they got a dragon, but then go and base and are too slow to get back to the Baron that OMG are able to get. And then it just kind of comes down to this final fight around the dragon after all of this back and forth and posturing, and after OMG are able to get that, they took it home. So closing out after really fighting to stay ahead and keep a lead against a very good team. I was impressed by that from them, and I think their strong team fight like played into that very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Definitely.
going into game 3, this was a very interesting game 3 with the picks. You see the Tristana mid from Scout versus Cream's Cassidon. Sorry, someone said, or I don't. Do you say creme de la creme earlier? No, someone said that to me at work, and I was like, that was what was in my mind. Like best of the best.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's why I said cream that way. But anyway, we have cream on the Cassidon. We have the Samira Alistar in the bot lane, which is a super, super like fun and exciting kind of matchup down there to be able to dive heavily. And we see LNG look to counter that by having the range from Varus, but also the Leona to give some CC and tankiness and protection. So just really some off the wall picks from the mid lane down, outside of the Cassidon pick, in the initial kind of pick ban of this game.
Yeah, and it was a lot of LNG just like being in the advantage through the game, but there was a point where OMG's team comp kind of turned on. They got enough items, they got enough levels under their belts where they really like started doing damage. Where I remember a point in the game where they're like 9-10k down, after LNG has played pretty consistently through this point to gain leads. But OMG, like, they win a fight here, they take this advantage here, and you're like, holy heck, like there's actually a world where there's like where this game ends with OMG winning. I think Cassidy was like growing. Obviously, the like his death score isn't really telling of I think
Mm-hmm.
how potent he was on the map and how disruptive he was. And Abel getting a couple of fights where that S rank just popped off and did so much damage.
Mm-hmm.
There was a world where this very aggressive dive heavy comp from ONG like won and took the bacon.
Yeah, no, it very easily could have happened, and I think we saw that in particular around the one of the late dragon fights where, or I think it was Elder, the Elder Dragon fight, because OMG
Mhm.
got poked out super hard initially. They kind of had to peel back, reset, stay alive, and then were able to re-engage and get a really good fight. But unfortunately for them, you have Tarzan going with this crazy AP Maokai, like super strong build because of the lead that he had and the number of
Mhm.
kills. That's just the saplings are doing stupid damage. He's able
Mhm.
to sustain up a quarter of his health like every time he gets
His little
his
smash
passive,
passive.
yeah, his passive proc off and everything. And so they just, he's able to keep them in it for so long and deter OMG from being able to take like the objectives that they needed to win that game.
Mhm.
And really were able to just kind of finagle a win out of a tight game and by going for the base race with the stopping the backs at the Elder Dragon, because they were like, this is too close, let's just make this decisive move and commit to it, and it paid off. But it was not um it was a very tight battle against LNG, who had not dropped a single map up until this until game 2 of the series.
Sure. Well, you could see the final sequence was less of a base race and
Well, yeah.
more of LNG like capitalizing on OMG's mistake where Tarzan was giving them so much trouble around the dragon pit where they literally teleported Shanji and Cream in to kill him. So they burned both their
Yeah.
teleports and immediately the Zika and Scout TP into the base and it was just over as they're just like running back trying to get there.
Yeah.
So like blunder from ONG and really strong heads up play from LNG to see that play was available. Tarzan kind of had him running around and on the ropes. So yeah, it was heads up and just a matter of getting the auto attacks down.
Absolutely. So really a exciting finish to a tight series, but OMG really impressed me in how they matched up versus LNG. I know that they're still down towards the bottom of that standings, but I think that they showed a lot of potential for themselves moving forward, and I think if they can kind of fine tune some of their play, that they will be a very difficult challenge for a lot of teams in the LPL. But then moving over to the LCK, we had the KT Rolster matchup versus Generation Gaming Gen G.
Yeah, and before we get into the KT roster versus Gen G, we're going to take a little bit of a break and then we'll be right back. All right, so now we're back to talk about KT Rolster and Gen G. This was an interesting matchup, being that KT Rolster has taken down some of the top teams in LCK right now in like what I would argue is kind of like maybe like upset fashion. So I was interested to see how they were going to do up against Gen G, and boy, this series did not disappoint.
No, it definitely didn't. Just from the start at in game 1, from the get go, we're seeing just kind of some posturing, some early kills in the bot lane. And then Dorn in the top lane was just getting some good advantages early in terms of his CS, being able to kind of push Keen out a little bit. So they tried to come out strong and just push some early advantages on the Gen G side.
Yeah, and I think that's what they kind of drafted their team comp to do, but maybe maybe a little bit over aggressive. I think maybe staying in positions where they should have just like took what they gained and backed off. So interestingly, they had like a bit of a gold advantage over Gen G in the early game. But like I said, I think some of this early aggression caused that lead to kind of fall back in the favor of Gen G. What I thought was interesting was the like consistent red side Gnar blind on fourth pick and not like really being that punished in this case by Doran. And overall, I think there were opportunities for KT to like get into this game, but there were some questionable plays from like individual players, like mainly that flash in the mid lane from BDD, where I think he like saw an opportunity that just faded away immediately, and
That
was
was
not.
the flash route, right?
Yeah. Team not able to follow up, wasn't as close as he thought he was, kind of thing. And I really think that gave a big window to Genji to kind of kick open a larger advantage. So I think that was pretty unfortunate, especially when Genji was just able to just like play side lanes pretty intelligently, not give anything up, and then just look to take the neutrals.
Yeah, they played their 1v1 matchups just very well, which kind of allowed them to just take these small incremental leads and then just make some pretty decisive moves. They had really good map control throughout game one. Like you said, taking objectives and kind of taking those advantages, and then just very decisively ended that game one pretty quickly at the 27 and a half minute mark or so, after kind of building all these incremental leads up until that point with their macro play. Game two coming in, I was very excited just from the pick and ban, to see the team comp coming out from KT Rolster, aiming with the Draven. I was excited to see, especially I think, and I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, but as a counter pick to the Yuumi, I believe. Yeah. So seeing that come out in game two as an immediate counter pick to the Yuumi and going, hey, if I can't hit you, I will just nuke your AD carry and then I'll hit you, I think was a really smart choice. And Aiming and Lehens played that bot lane very, very well, in just throughout the game, going 6-0 and 14 combined between the two of them. Just really, really strong counter pick in that bot lane.
Yeah, and especially after like on this patch, Yuumi has taken like a pretty significant nerf. Her attack range was shortened and no more movement speed on one of her activated abilities. So pretty significantly, as one of the casters said, like not a champion anymore. So interesting choice in this position, I think, from Gen G to take a champion that had one of her large strengths taken away from her, and then again, just like a draft note, we're seeing the red side pick for Gnar, this time for KT Rolster, ends up just being a fine pick, and I think the alt being just a super strong tool. That's why we just keep seeing him pop up. But the fact that teams are seeing that as just one of the best red side blind top lane options where like most things are available, they're saying, yeah, let's go with that. I think pretty interesting in that perspective. But yeah, just good drafting overall. I think from KT, recognizing the weak Yumi in the bottom lane, capitalizing it with like an already strong champion against it, and then just like really making it bleed in that sense. Because yeah, it was a pretty ugly advantage there in the bottom lane for aiming and Lehens.
Yeah, and it kind of played very well into KT's hands. We saw Gen G really trying to do what they had done in game one and force themselves into a like objective control position and try and just like take control of that when they didn't have the same kind of advantages that they had in game one. They make a really bad Baron call where they didn't have the proper setup and all, which KT was able to flip and then just kind of take the map pressure and just kind of continue to snowball that or push that forward until the second Baron fight where they're able to just take out Genji and then push to end the game. It was, I think that that focus on controlling objectives no matter what that really ended up being Genji's downfall a little bit at that Baron fight. To try and take that when they didn't have the kind of setup that they needed.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, and that opened the door for KT take their win over Genji, bring it to a game three. And in the they kept hinting at it. We finally got it. BDD's 100th game of his year.
Yeah, and I mean he's got to be good at this point. So
I would hope so. Yeah, I would hope so.
But yeah, I think it was, and so like going into the third game of this, it was pretty interesting to kind of see I felt like we got very specific views of KT and Genji throughout the series. Genji really has such a strong focus on the objective control that they tried to lay out from the very beginning, trying to take the dragons early, lead into the Rift Herald and kind of fight around that. But I think that the issue I see with them is that because they are focusing so much on these objectives that it does leave some room open that a good team fighting team can just take a fight and win it and then take those objectives from you, and you lose a lot of your power that you're putting in and gaining from the objective control that you're pushing for. And on KT's side, they're team fighting really well. They crush the fight at the Rift Herald early on, get some kills, but they and throughout the series, they would continuously just step too far and overextend themselves after winning a posture or a fight, and they would just hang too long, stay around too long, and Genji was able to kind of take advantage of those moments because they are a good team with good individual players. And so when you have that team fighting prowess that we saw from KT, and then you just keep hanging on that little bit too long, you're gonna end up putting yourself in a bad spot where you have cooldowns down, where you are not at full health. And Genji did a really good job of recognizing that, but just weren't quite able to really entirely flip the script on KT's team fight.
Yeah, because we even saw like at this point in the game, Lucian is massive. He's 6 items. He was shredding through the front line of KT. So there was definitely an angle there. Keen was not doing a whole lot of damage to the front line of Genji, so they had advantage there where he really would have had to like be threading it through the carry or like threading it through the front line to hit basically just pays on the Lucian. He got a couple of good tags on him, which I think is ultimately what allowed them to like really move forward at the Baron. Aiming goes through the wall, just annihilates like 4 of them, and it just is, you know, sealed up in that position. But yeah, overall, I think Gen G was looking for the advantage that they could take. But yeah, overall, the damage was pretty high from KT's side.
Yeah, and I think that is like it's something that Gen G can take forward because they did what they do very well. They did really try to control the objectives and make good, strong macro moves around the map, but they did just kind of falter in a few moments with the team fights. So it's something they can work on and hopefully grow upon to continue competing there at the top of the LCK. They're up there tied in second with Live Sandbox at 6-2, and have played very well, but they just have these small moments where they are, I think, almost too focused on their play style that they slip up in other areas of their gameplay a little bit.
Yeah, I would. I would definitely agree with that.
So, but that does wrap up our League of Legends chit chat for this week. I know we had a little bit of IEM that we wanted to talk about. If you want to lead us through that, I unfortunately didn't get to watch much in terms of games, but was kind of looking for some stats and things like that to see how these teams did in their matchups.
Well, I'm no real expert. I'm just gonna hit you with the the overarching points here that I was, basically the main storylines that I was paying attention to. One player that I found super exciting to watch was Monacy on G2. He was just like a highlight for me. I think stood above where there are a bunch of other players in my mind that I think have like a legacy slot in my mind as like, oh yeah, like I've heard this player is good. I should look out for them. But when you're watching G2 play, like this guy is like just insanely fun to watch. His speed is wild. And so from the like winning team angle, Monacy from G2 hit the one of the uppers on G2 was just really fun to watch. Had a really solid tournament. Interestingly, from G2's perspective, I mean there are a bunch of teams, so many matches. I saw literally 1% of the games from the tournament. So I'm like no expert at all, but G2 only dropped one map the whole tournament, and it was in the finals against Heroic. So they were just unstoppable throughout the whole thing. The like my team to watch, Navi, purely just because of like some players on their lineup. They made a pretty deep run, so a couple of their games were really fun to watch. But here's an angle you may not have thought I would give you, but here's like my main story point from Katowice.
Okay.
So the team Heroic, who went up against G2 in the finals, they had a really solid run themselves, but Heroic and their in-game leader Cadian were coming off I would argue, a pretty rough loss at the end of last year. If you remember, it was Jame and Outsiders against Cadian and Heroic in the finals of, what was that, Rio at the end of last year. I am Rio. That was a pretty close fought battle. And now, at Rio, Cadian falls to Outsiders. They get second. Outsiders takes first. Cadian loses, and this isn't like his first loss at in major spots either. This is just like another one that he's got to take, And now going into the finals after having like a pretty solid run of a tournament themselves, oh God, here you are, Cadian, looking at this undefeated G2. Here you are in the finals again, against like arguably a much, much stronger opponent than you had to face in outsiders in Rio. So, damn, if you had a chance, it was then. It is not now. So, like, from the Heroic and Cadian's perspective, what a rough roll to get G2 that are just insane. Insane. You get, this another final for Cadian to just like come up short, only get to lift the second place trophy. So when I was watching the final, I was rooting for Heroic, and they get that board. Oh my God, you're like, they can actually do this. Like they can do it. G2 was so much better on the day, but I think a 3-0 was expected, obviously, because they hadn't lost a map. But yeah, really, really tough run there for Cadian.
Yeah, and I mean from the other side of it for G2, it is kind of crazy. And so like obviously like you said, there are certain guys that you look for that are like big in the CS:GO world that are playing in these tournaments. Nico, one of Monacy's teammates on G2, has been around for quite a while. But looking at Monacy, one thing that is just absolutely wild that he has almost solidified himself as one of the greats already. And I'm not trying to sing his praises, but he has done more in such a short amount of time than most. He played for Navi Junior from January of 2020 till January of 2022 so 2 years on Navi Junior, playing for their team. Comes on to G2's CSGO team from 2022 till present and has already gone ahead and won 2 majors with the Blast Premier World Final in 2022 and then winning IEM Katowice with G2 here in 2023. So he is already stacked as a 17-year-old, 2 trophies on that mantle. He is just getting started. And so coming in and as such a young player, as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, getting these big tournament wins, like I am expecting he's going to be someone to keep an eye on for a quite long time in the CSGO world.
Yeah.
He's on a trajectory like I can't imagine many have been on in their professional career.
Yeah, and we'll have to see if if the team sticks together, if they're able to keep up this run. But yeah, right now they are the best in CS:GO, and it was a pretty exciting tournament. I think there was from what I saw, there was a lot of good stuff. Obviously, I didn't see all of it again, but yeah, pretty exciting final, and just like a dominant run from the team that won. So maybe from that perspective, it's like not that interesting. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a fun tournament to catch.
Yeah, and it creates interesting storylines moving forward because it kind of does put G2 in this spot of Goliath and waiting to see who comes along as David to try and take him down. So it'll be some exciting CS:GO tournaments throughout the rest of the year. We've got plenty of tournaments to go, with the Blast tournaments later on in the year. But to bring us down to our flavor of the week here, why don't you lead us off into it?
All right, so I've got an old one here, but a good one. If you're into, I don't know what they used to call it, but the genre that it was in my iPod as, what the old boys told me, they sold it to me as trip hop.
Okay.
The old Gorillaz album, the D sides. It starts off with just like a bunch of just like studio songs, but then it gives you like 10 to 12 like remixes of like songs that you know from them, just like different cuts, different versions, like different ways that they cut it. And it's all super fun. And if you're a Gorillaz fan, there's a version of Kids with Guns on it. It's called the Jamie Tees remix. It is a wonderful little piece of art that if you hadn't heard it,
Okay.
go check it out. And it's really fun. So I was listening to the Gorillaz D Sides album, and then my food here for the week, I was gifted some homemade sauerkraut from a client. I wasn't like big on sauerkraut. I'm no Weird Al Yankovic, but yeah, I was definitely turned on the sauerkraut. The homemade was pretty quality. We had it with some pork, and we definitely had to enjoy that. So thank you to the client who gifted it to us, and we're working through that jar pretty quickly.
Nice. Gotta love some good sauerkraut and pork. That is my family New Year's tradition. So
Yep. And I think that's the way for a lot of families, as was mine. But yeah, so nice little gift. And then my visual medium, I'm a Marvel little money pig. I just wanna see what's going on. And at a certain point, like we're close to being caught up. So I'm gonna keep the mediocrity rolling. I tuned into Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, and it was not as bad as Sarah said it was when she had seen it. So this was like the second time. She fell asleep during it, so like, that is what it is.
yeah.
But I was, let's just say I enjoyed myself watching it. Will I ever put it on again? Probably not. But I'm just at least happy to know like where they're at in the story, and
Okay.
my OCD brain can be like, all right, we're catching up. We're gonna put all the pieces together. We're gonna have it all organized.
It's checked off the to-do list.
Yeah, but definitely just like wallowing in mediocrity at this point. But that is my flavor of the week here, sir. Let me hear yours.
Sounds good. So for I'll start out off with my visual medium, and so my visual medium this week is the Super Bowl halftime show with Rihanna. I just thought it was really it was cool how they did the set design. Like I thought in general, and I've gotten shit from my friends for it. I thought it was fine as a like
Okay.
performance in general. I've been more entertained by other Super Bowl performances previously. I also don't think the Super Bowl performance is a great setting for some sort of spectacular like awing like whoa, I'm just mind blown kind of
Right.
like thing. You have 13 minutes of like singing half of a song and then blending it into the next one like you're
Oh
a
yeah.
second rate like one artist disc jockey. And so I think that in general like I wasn't like she sounded good, but the shows don't ever really like get me.
Sure.
But the like visual aesthetic of it with her floating on these like giant platforms in the air, along with all the dancers and everything that were doing that as well. Some of the visuals were so stark with like such a wide camera angle and just how small she is like standing on this platform above so many people. I just
Right.
thought it was very cool, which also kind of prompted me a little bit afterwards to get into my music for this week, which I was touching back on some ASAP Rocky, Rihanna's
Oh,
baby daddy. So it
gotcha.
after the performance and them talking about her being pregnant again with her next child, just it brought back to recollection that ASAP Rocky is right there with her, and so I was jamming out to some of his music that I've enjoyed previously, and so I
Nice.
enjoyed some of that. And then for my food this week, yesterday for Valentine's Day, we had a Valen Taco Tuesday, and got
Nice.
some solid tacos from one of the local taquerias, and some good tacos, some good guac, great salsa, and so it was a nice.
You put the guac on the taco?
I don't. I usually just go for it with chips, but I mean, I've had tacos with guac on them, but for these, I was just kind of went with the way they had made them, and enjoyed that. But that does round out my flavor of the week, as well as this week's episode. So as always, we really appreciate everyone taking the time to listen, spend with us. We look forward to doing this week after week, so check us out on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what your flavor of the week was. At Tall and Short of 1 on Twitter, the number 1. But Justin, let's take this out of here.
Thank you so much for listening. Tell your friends. New episodes every Thursday. New episodes, Tall and Short of a Podcast. Peace out, everyone.
Adios.